Chapter 134. When the fifth prince and the sixth prince thought of their recent actions, their faces turned deathly pale. Large drops of cold sweat flowed down their cheeks and hair and flowed into their clothes. The crown prince had always been filial and had both ability and integrity. As long as he waited patiently, the dragon throne would be his sooner or later. Why would he need to use force to abdicate? They knew that something was wrong and even suspected that it was done by each other, but they never thought of pleading for the crown prince. Instead, they took the opportunity to add insult to injury and wanted to kill the crown prince and the young imperial grandson. They gathered their henchmen and stirred up chaos in the court. They all dreamed of ascending to the throne, but they never thought that their father had already seen their ugly behavior and remembered it in his heart. Yupinian had returned and brought back hundreds of thousands of soldiers. If they made any strange movements, they would probably die without a complete corpse. At this moment, an indescribable regret spread in their hearts. They hated themselves for being blinded by power and forgot how terrifying their father was. As they waited for the cruel fate to come, they were full of admiration and envy for the silent fourth prince. It was the fourth prince who understood. From beginning to end, he stood on the crown prince's side and pleaded for mercy for the crown prince at every court meeting. He was loyal, calm, and filial. Presumably, their father would be very pleased to see this. When this matter was over, the fourth prince would be a prince who ruled over tens of thousands of people, and they would most likely be demoted to commoners. The fifth prince and the sixth prince were like defeated roosters, standing in the hall with their heads down. The fourth prince stood next to the two. Other than his face being slightly pale, there was nothing strange about him. The crown prince and Xianghua had changed into their court robes and slowly walked over. Their expressions were calm and collected. Behind them was a group of dragon-scale guard holding steel swords. Embroidered on their official robes was a ferocious yazi, but the color was not the usual dark red. Instead, it was the color of a blood pool in hell. This was a type of official robe that the civil and military officials had never seen before. For a moment, they didn't know where these people came from. Were they the dragon-scale guard? Only Ao Ping, who was standing behind the fourth prince, was shocked. He had long heard that the dragon-scale guard was divided into two units, one in the light and one in the dark. However, he had never seen the members of the dark unit after being placed in an important position by the emperor, so he thought it was just a rumor. Only after seeing him today did he realize that it was not a rumor in the marketplace. It was just that the emperor had never trusted him. Didn't he see the dragon-scale guard at the front of the hall nod slightly at Yupinian? It was obvious that they already knew each other. The emperor's trust in Yupinian far exceeded his own, and even the fourth prince's imagination. Ao Ping tightened his grip on the hilt of his sword, and a determined expression appeared on his face. However, he saw the fourth prince turn to look at him and shake his head without a trace. Now that things had come to this, there was no point in resisting. The front and back of the palace hall had probably been ambushed by countless experts of the dark sect. The ministers who had agreed to rise up with him had either really sided with him or were part of the trap set by his imperial father and the crown prince. The answer was obvious. You think you're a hero, but in the eyes of others, you're just a clown. The saddest thing in the world is this. The fourth prince suddenly felt very tired. He lowered his head and silently waited for his fate. Like him, the fifth prince and the sixth prince also accepted their fate. However, when the dragon-scale guard swarmed up and took the fourth prince away without touching them, the shock in their hearts was simply indescribable. The officials who had been won over by them were also dumbfounded and momentarily stunned on the spot. The one who had truly crossed the line was the fourth prince. Although the actions of the two princes and their henchmen were punishable, if they were killed one by one, it would shake the throne of the country. It was better to spare their lives. On the contrary, it would serve as a deterrent to the officials, purge the court, and stabilize the people's hearts. From then on, for the next few decades, it was likely that no one would dare to do anything else. Emperor Qing Kong did not explain all of this. He only waved his hand and had the fourth prince and his henchmen taken away. When he spoke again, he was extremely tired. "I'm tired and need to rest. From today onwards, the crown prince will temporarily be in charge of the country. No matter whether it's a big or small matter, you can report it to the crown prince without asking for my permission. Court is dismissed. Beloved Minister Yu, please stay." The officials who were lucky enough to escape hurriedly knelt and saluted, saying, "Long live the crown prince." In Yangxin Palace Hall, Emperor Qing Kang's desk was filled with many documents, all of which contained evidence of the fourth prince's crimes. Just the names of the people involved in the case alone was a thick stack. He was only in his early 20s this year, but as early as 14 years old, he had begun to plan for today's events. The number of people he had roped in, both openly and secretly, was innumerable. If it weren't for the fact that he had secretly observed him for several months and unearthed all of the clues he had planted, even if he was executed, it would still leave behind a huge hidden danger. Emperor Qing Kong threw away the documents and let out a long sigh. It was a pity for this son of his. If he could use his talents on the right path, he would definitely become a virtuous official. If he didn't betray the interests of the country for his own selfish desires, perhaps he could be spared his life. After sighing, Emperor Qing Kong looked at the calm crown prince sitting next to him, then looked at the tall and straight figure of his trusted subordinate. Emperor Qing Kang's bad mood slightly improved. He smiled and said, "Yifeng, you just came back from Shijiang, so you should rest for a while. However, the court is in turmoil right now, and everyone is in a state of panic. The crown prince and I can only rely on you. The matter of arresting and interrogating the remnants of the fourth prince's party will be left to you. When the dust has settled, I will reward you greatly." Yu Pinyin half knelt and cupped his hands. Reporting to the emperor, "Can this humble official use military merits and rewards in exchange for a decree from you?" "What decree?" Emperor Qing Kong raised his eyebrows. This was the first time Yu Pinyin had asked him for a decree. "A decree to grant a marriage." "Oh. Which girl have you taken a fancy to?" Emperor Qing Kang's body slightly leaned forward, his turbid eyes shining with interest. Even the mature and prudent crown prince couldn't help but be surprised. Yu Pinyin didn't like women, much less men. The common people of the capital all said that he was a cold-blooded and heartless monster. However, they didn't expect that this monster would also fall in love, and that he would seriously ask the emperor for a favor. Yu Pinyin's eyes softened, and he said firmly, "I beg the emperor to grant a marriage between me and Xiang'er." The document in the crown prince's hand fell to the ground with a clatter. Emperor Qing Kong was dumbfounded, and it took him a long time to regain his senses. Not only did he not feel that it was absurd, he even clapped his hands and laughed. No wonder that girl was willing to risk her life to find you in Shijiang. It turns out that the two of you already have deep feelings for each other. Yes, deep feelings have already been planted, and it's hard for me to extricate myself. Yu Pinyin admitted without hesitation. Emperor Qing Kong was a man who was about to die. After so many twists and turns, he had even seen through life and death. How could he be bothered by these mundane matters? It was rare to find someone who was infatuated with love. Since this pair of son and daughter had feelings for each other, why couldn't he grant them their wish? Don't talk about sibling incest. Right now, everyone in the capital knew that Yu Xiang wasn't of the family Yu bloodline. As long as the two of them were willing, who could stop them? Asking for a decree was only so that Yu Xiang could straighten his back and not be criticized by others in the future. This kind of protectiveness was very moving. Emperor Qing Kong laughed and waved his hand. "Help me and the crown prince clean up the imperial hall. In the future, you will be rewarded, and you will be granted a marriage. We definitely won't treat you unfairly." Yu Pinyin was overjoyed. He bid farewell to the two and left the palace to return home. The matriarch had just severed ties with the mother and daughter of the Lin clan when she saw many dragon scale guards dressed in black official robes rush into the family ancestral hall. Without a word, they arrested the mother and daughter of the Lin clan and the third branch. The person in the lead glanced at the document on the table and raised his eyebrows. This official will take this document to the Ministry of Revenue for you to declare. Fortunately, you were smart enough. Otherwise, we wouldn't have just arrested these few people today. After he finished speaking, he personally went to help the matriarch and restrained his hostility. Old matriarch, it's a mess here. This humble one will send you back. The matriarch looked at his black official robes and was rather confused. The embroidery on his body was indeed Yazzie, but why didn't the color match? Were these people really her grandson's subordinates? That person didn't explain. Instead, he repeatedly pleaded with her with a respectful attitude. Only then did the matriarch let down her guard and leave under the protection of a group of guards. When they were all gone, the Yu clan clansmen struggled to stand up and shout, "Oh my God, that was so close. If we were a step late, our entire clan would have been arrested and sent to the imperial prison." Old matriarch's foresight is still far and clear. All the clan elders nodded in agreement, feeling rather scared. As for those who helped the third branch to redress their grievances, they were so scared that they fell ill and couldn't recover. As soon as Yuxiang left the ancestral hall, she was brought back to the family Shen by people sent by Shen Yuanqi. In the evening, she received the matriarch's invitation, inviting them to the prefecture Yu for a banquet. Yuxiang took a flower petal bath and put on a charming peach blossom makeup. She wore a pink cloud butterfly dress and also applied a few drops of rose essential oil behind her ears, neck, and wrists. Her entire person was tender, delicate, and fragrant. When people saw her, they couldn't help but want to stick their eyes to her body. Shen Yuanqi was originally very fond of her, but when he thought about how his younger sister dressed up so splendidly just to meet Yu Pinyin, his mood became very sour. He restrained himself from locking the little lass at home. He pointed at the wheelchair and asked, "Why are you still in the wheelchair? Didn't you say that your legs have healed a long time ago? Master Ku Hui said that my bones haven't fully healed yet. It's cold in winter, so if I walk too much, it's easy to trigger arthritis. I still need to sit in the wheelchair often," Yuxiang said, pretending to be serious. When Shen Yuanqi heard this, he felt very distressed and hurriedly ordered people to bring a thick blanket to cover her. He felt that it was inappropriate, so he put 2 hot water cups on her legs. Lulu, who was behind them, curled her lips and thought, "Miss, if you want Master Ho to openly hug you, just say so. It's not kind of you to pretend to be sick to scare the young master." When the group arrived at Marquis Yongla, they saw Yu Pinyin, who was wearing a black robe, already standing at the gate and waiting for them. When he saw the little lass sitting in the wheelchair, his cold and stiff face suddenly bloomed with a gentle smile. He bypassed Shen Yuanqi, who was cupping his hands in greeting, and directly took the little lass into his arms. He even held her buttocks and weighed them. He said discontentedly, "You've lost weight. Did you not eat properly? I missed you so much that I didn't have the appetite to eat or drink. Naturally, I lost weight." Yuxiang leaned over and whispered in his ear, making him laugh loudly. Shen Yuanqi gnashed his teeth as he watched from the side. However, because Yu Pinyin had just returned home safely, he didn't want to embarrass him. He could only fake a smile and say, "Official Yu, you're not inviting us in." Chapter 135. The banquet was very sumptuous, and they even opened several jars of imperial wine. The two families had gone through trials and tribulations together and had already formed a deep friendship. Now that the bitterness was over, they naturally had endless things to say. Yuxiang secretly stepped on her brother's feet a few times, then used her fingertips to poke his thigh. However, she pretended to be very serious. She raised her wine cup and said, "Come, for our family reunion, let's all drink up." After saying that, she downed the cup in one gulp. Yu Pinyin looked at her with sparkling eyes and also downed his cup in one gulp. The matriarch and the others responded one after another. Gradually, they became excited. They toasted each other and drank all the jars of wine. Yu Xiang loved to drink but was not good at it. After a few cups of wine, she became dizzy. However, she was very good at drinking. She neither cried nor fell asleep. She only rested her cheeks on her hands and looked at her brother beside her with a smile. Her fiery eyes were full of love that could not be concealed. Yu Pinyin was distracted by her gaze. He wished he could drive everyone out and then take the little girl into his arms and dote on her. The matriarch looked at her granddaughter's silly appearance and smiled with nostalgia. Xiang is drunk. Once she's drunk, she doesn't recognize anyone except her brother. Oh, that's right, she also loves to sing. I still remember that year on the reunion night, I got her drunk and asked her to sing. She could sing alone as well as an opera troupe. She could easily sing whatever was ugly. It could be said that her skills were extraordinary. I know that she doesn't recognize people when she's drunk, but I didn't know that she also loves to sing. Shen Yuanqi suddenly became interested and probed, Xiang, sing a song. Yu Xiang looked at him lazily, then looked at her brother beside her. She raised her orchid fingers and sang, the birds on the tree are in pairs, the green water and green mountains bring smiles, you plow the fields for me to weave cloth, you carry water for me to water the garden, although the cold cave is broken, it can shelter us from the wind and rain, husband and wife love each other, bitter and sweet, from now on, we no longer have to suffer the pain of slavery, husband and wife return home together. She skillfully switched between male and female voices. As she sang, she hung the song around her elder brother's neck and repeated the line, a husband and wife's love is bitter and sweet, several times. Yu Pinyin had long discovered one thing, once his sister got drunk, her biggest hobby was not to daydream or sing, but to flirt with him. He had lost count of how many times it had been, but the sudden joy and wild love were as strong as the first time. He held his sister's slender waist and naturally placed her on his lap. After Yu Xiang finished singing, she mumbled, brother, I want a fruity wine-flavored kiss. She pouted her red lips as she spoke. Yu Pinyin wanted to skin her alive, but he knew that this was not the right place. He pinched her lips and coaxed, be good. I'll give it to you after dinner. No, I want it now. I want it now. Yu Xiang hung around Yu Pinyin's neck and swayed from side to side. She wanted to kiss his thin lips, but she missed the target several times. She could only cry out unwillingly. Tao Hong and Lu both held their foreheads and could not bear to watch. Old Madame Fu did not know whether to laugh or cry. Yu Siyu felt that it was an eye-opener, but she also felt shy. She turned her head away and tried to hold back her laughter. Shen Yuanqi wanted to beat up Yu Pinyin for abducting his sister, but he forced a smile on his face and said gently, Xiang is drunk. I'll take her home now. No, I haven't seen my brother for a long time. Let me see him properly. Yu Xiang flatly refused. How long has it been? It's only been a few days. Xiang be good. Come down quickly. Shen Yuanqi wanted to tear his sister apart. Just as he reached out his hand, Yu Pinyin brushed it away and glared at him coldly. A few days. Haven't you heard that one day apart feels like 3 autumns? Let me count, I haven't seen my brother for a few autumns. She stretched out 5 fingers and bent them one by one. She said in distress, 3 autumns, 6 autumns, 9 autumns, 12 autumns. Ah, I can't count anymore. 2 lifetimes have passed. Shen Yuanqi's face turned green. Yu Siyu could no longer support herself. She leaned on the table and laughed. She never knew that Yu Xiang was so funny when she was drunk. Old Madame Fu also laughed uncontrollably and almost fell off the stool. The little girl's confession was so passionate and sincere that Yu Pinyin could no longer hold back. He picked her up and walked towards the side room. Shen Yuanqi hurriedly chased after them, but was stopped by old Madame Fu. She said bluntly, "Lord Shen, don't chase after them. I'm afraid that they've already privately agreed to marry each other. Come on, let's hurry up and choose an auspicious date for their marriage." Shen Yuanqi understood that a grown girl could not be kept at home. If she stayed, she would become enemies. He had no choice but to sit down and discuss with the old lady. Yu Pinyin hurriedly returned to the room and placed the dizzy little girl on the bed. She licked her lips impatiently and struggled to take off her smock. She stretched out her hand towards her brother. "Brother, we haven't seen each other for 2 lifetimes. Why don't you come over and kiss me and hug me? I missed you so much." Yu Pinyin lowered his head and stared at her for a long time with the tip of his nose pressed against hers. He chuckled and sucked on her bright red lips. The two of them hugged each other tightly and only reluctantly separated when they were about to suffocate. "A kiss that tastes like fruit wine. It's so fragrant and sweet." Yu Xiang narrowed her eyes and savored the taste. Her satisfied appearance amused Yu Pinyin. He found that as long as the little girl was by his side, his originally stagnant heart would be filled with joy. He stopped laughing and his eyes deepened. He lowered his head and kissed her again. However, he heard a shout from outside the door. "Yandere, old madam and I have set a few good dates. You can come and choose. Let's quickly get married." It was said to be picking a date, but in reality, it was to disturb his good fortune. However, that was his future brother-in-law, so he had to endure. Yu Pinyin secretly gritted his teeth and used his greatest self-control to pull off the little girl who was clinging onto him and stuffed her into the quilt. He pecked her slightly pouted red lips. After walking a few steps, he felt reluctant and turned around to peck her lips again. Only then did he push the door open. The usually empty and gloomy prison was now overcrowded. The 4th prince was locked up alone in the corner of the prison. His henchmen and their families were locked up in the outer cells. As more and more people came in and out of the Dragon Scale Guard, the prison was almost full. Yu Miaoqi and the Lin clan were mixed in with the families of the guilty officials. There were constant cries and cries of injustice coming from all around them. The red-clothed Dragon Scale Guards were all replaced by black-clothed Dragon Scale Guards. Their physiques were sturdier, their faces were colder, and their temperaments were more ferocious. Their hands were constantly on the hilts of their swords, as if they would cut anyone in half if they even slightly touched the prison door. These people were all unfamiliar faces, but the strong bloodlust in their eyes showed that they were already an extremely valiant elite force. They were the trump card that Emperor Qing Kong kept in the palm of his hand and never used lightly. The 4th prince lowered his head and smiled bitterly. He secretly thought that his loss was not unjust. "4th prince, why are you here?" Yu Miaoqi squeezed out of the crowd with great difficulty and saw the 4th prince locked up in the deepest part of the prison. She cried out in disbelief. "Then where should this prince be?" The 4th prince asked calmly. Shouldn't you be in the throne room? You are so wise and powerful, so how did you fall into this kind of situation?" Yu Miaoqi felt as if her heart was about to jump out of her throat. If even the 4th prince was in here, who else in the world could save her? How did this prince fall into this kind of situation? This prince also wants to know. Why don't you help this prince ask your elder brother? It was unknown what the 4th prince thought of, but he shook his head and laughed in spite of himself. Yu Miaoqi, this prince originally thought that he was the most pitiful and stupid person in the world, but after seeing you, I feel much better. This prince only tried to tempt you with benefits, and you helped this prince frame your own elder brother. Who would have thought that without Yu Pinyin's protection, you would not even be as good as the dust on the ground? Your temperament is cold, ungrateful, and you only care about benefits. How could this prince take a liking to someone like you? Those promises from back then were just empty words. Yu Miaoqi seemed to have suffered a great blow, and she fell limp to the ground. The Lin clan crawled over with difficulty. He wanted to hug her, but when he remembered that he had fallen into this state because of her instigation, he slowly withdrew his outstretched hand. "You're from the Lin clan. You're Yu Miaoqi." It was unknown which family's madam recognized the two of them, but she said with a bit of schadenfreude, "One of you is Yu Pinyan's mother, and the other is Yu Pinyan's little sister. You should have enjoyed endless glory and wealth in this life, so why did you have to be so stupid as to oppose him? But this is also good. We have Yu Pinyan's blood relatives to accompany us in the Yellow Springs, so it's not a loss." "What Yellow Springs? Don't speak nonsense. Big brother is only scaring me and my mother. He definitely won't abandon us." Yu Miaoqi shouted fiercely. "I'm not scaring you. This prince has already severed all ties with you too. Your life and death has nothing to do with this prince." It was unknown when Yu Pinyan had appeared in the dark corridor, but he slowly walked to the flickering candlelight. His incomparably handsome face emitted a jade-like radiance. His long and narrow eyes slightly narrowed as he emotionlessly looked at the mother and daughter at his feet. He wore a black official's robe with a sinister yazi embroidered in the center of his chest. His hand was pressed against the scabbard of his embroidered spring saber. His seemingly lazy but actually vigilant posture made his baleful aura even more threatening. Yu Miaoqi was frostbitten by the cold aura emitted from his body. She quickly retreated, but she didn't forget to defend herself. "No matter how you sever all ties, I am still your blood-related little sister. Who in this world would kill their own blood-related little sister? It's simply intolerable, by the heavens. Who in this world would harm their adoptive father, kill their adoptive mother, slander their adoptive brother, frame their blood-related older sister, frame their blood-related older brother, and destroy their family? If we're talking about heavenly justice, you should have been struck by lightning a long time ago. Even if you went through the 18 layers of hell, you still wouldn't be able to wash away the sins on your body. Only by falling into the path of the beast for all of your lives would you be able to make up for it. Yu Miaoqi, don't talk to me about blood-related kinship. The one who first abandoned blood-related kinship was you, not me. Today's karma is all the karma you sowed back then. Just bear with it." After he finished speaking, he strode towards the prison where the male prisoners were locked up, leaving behind Yu Miaoqi who was wailing in despair. Hearing Yu Pinyan's words, the female prisoners all distanced themselves from her. They had never seen such a heartless and unscrupulous person in their lives. Yu Pinyan stopped in front of the prison and asked in a low voice, "Who is Sun Mingjie?" The prisoners all hid in the innermost corner. When they saw his thumb constantly moving the scabbard, causing the blade to emit an ear-piercing buzzing sound, they looked at each other. Finally, they found Sun Mingjie and pushed him out. Yu Pinyan had a smile on his face, but his tone was extremely cold. "I heard that you wanted to take Xiang'er as your concubine. You even said that if Xiang'er fell into your hands, you would make her beg for death." "You, Commander Yu, I was wrong, please spare me. I was stupid, I didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth." Sun Mingjie knelt on the ground and kowtowed desperately. His father rushed over to protect him, while his mother wailed miserably in the opposite prison. Chapter 136. The criminal officials who had rebelled with the fourth prince were either beheaded or exiled. Outside the Meridian Gate, there were people dying every day. The thick layer of blood could not be cleaned up. It had already formed dark brown hard lumps on the execution platform, emitting a kind of fishy smell that made people retreat. Many aristocratic families were implicated and declined one after another. Many new nobles quickly rose up and stood in the court. Under the control of Emperor Qing Kong and the Crown Prince, the change of power was carried out in an orderly manner. In the end, the fourth prince was sentenced to be beheaded. This drama of seizing the throne hadn't truly begun before it came to an end. The fifth prince and the sixth prince were both stripped of their titles. Although they weren't demoted to commoners, they weren't far off. 2 months later, Emperor Qing Kong announced his abdication and officially handed over the country to the crown prince. He also felt that he had killed and seriously injured the throne, so he dealt leniently with the families of the officials involved. Those who weren't deeply involved were either sold or exiled. At least their lives were saved. If not for this, based on the crimes these people had committed, their entire families would have been slaughtered. The blood at the entrance of the market might have drowned the legs and stomachs of the pedestrians. However, Yu Miaoqi and the Lin clan weren't among these people who were dealt with leniently. When the two of them saw the last meal delivered by the jailers, they were so scared that their souls almost left their bodies. They leaned against the prison door and kept begging for mercy. The Lin clan cried until their throats were hoarse. Only then did they truly realize that they had no way to live. She sat in a daze for a moment, then picked up the last meal and ate it very seriously and carefully. Yu Miaoqi looked at the pitch-black corridor outside the prison door, then looked at the despairing and numb Lin clan. She said sternly, "This is the last meal. You can't eat it. Why can't you eat it? Don't tell me you're still hoping that someone will come and save us." The Lin clan raised their heads. For the first time, they looked at their daughter with unfamiliar and cold eyes. When she knew that death was coming, she finally woke up from this terrifying dream. She turned her head and looked back at her former self. All that was left was a heart full of absurdity and not knowing whether to laugh or cry. What had she done? For such a heartless and selfish daughter, she had abandoned her mother-in-law, her son, and her status as a Junjia's wife. But what did she get in the end? There was only his daughter's resentment and scolding and this bowl of rice. She deserved to die, so why didn't she eat it? What she was most afraid of now was not death, but how she would meet her husband in the Yellow Springs. When he asked him whether he had taken good care of his son, whether he had taken good care of his mother-in-law, and whether he had established the Marquis family, how should he answer him? Could it be that I have ignored my son and mother-in-law for more than 10 years? Not only that, I even joined forces with my daughter to almost destroy the Marquis Yongle. After hearing what she said, the Junjie would probably kill her first. So absurd, so laughable, so stupid. What was he thinking back then to walk step by step into the abyss until he was beyond redemption? The head of the Lin clan spat out the chicken bone in his mouth and turned to look at his daughter, who was crying out for her innocence. Slowly, a bleak smile appeared on his face. "Grandmother, have you come to save us?" Granddaughter knows she was wrong. From now on, granddaughter will definitely listen to you and won't cause any more trouble. Grandmother, please forgive granddaughter. Yu Miaoqi shouted emotionally when she saw the people walking over from the end of the corridor. She kept calling them grandmother and granddaughter, constantly reminding the matriarch of their blood relationship. The head of the Lin clan threw his bowl of rice and threw himself to the side of the cell door to look out. With tears streaming down his face, he asked, "Mother, have you come to send us off?" "Mother, daughter-in-law knows she was wrong. Daughter-in-law has let you down, let Yandere down, and let Junjie down. Daughter-in-law deserves to die." The matriarch was very surprised by the Lin clan's sudden repentance. She couldn't help but stare at her, and finally sighed, "So what if you know you were wrong? Unfortunately, it's all too late." Then, she looked at the jailer and waved her hand slightly, "Let them out." The Lin clan was dumbfounded, but Yu Miaoqi was wild with joy. She impatiently squeezed out of the half-open cell door and cried, "Granddaughter thanks grandmother for saving my life. From now on, granddaughter will definitely be filial to you." The matriarch took the lead to walk out with Mama Ma's support. She sneered, "I don't dare accept your kindness. I'm afraid that one day, you'll suddenly stab a knife into my heart. I put down my old face to plead for mercy on your behalf only to shut the mouths of the people in the world. No matter what, Yandere can't bear the crime of killing his own family. In the end, he still has to be a human, unlike you, who have already been reduced to animals. The Lin clan's footsteps became stiffer and stiffer. She felt that rather than leaving this place alive, it would be better to die on the guillotine. She already had no face to see her son. Yu Miaoqi obediently followed behind the matriarch. She thought to herself that she could just let her scold them. Once the matriarch finished venting her anger, she would take her back and become Marquis Yongle again. Oh, no, Duke Yu Fu's miss. Even the history books would turn over a new page. Her life could also start anew. However, when they reached the door, 2 soldiers raised their swords and halberds to welcome them. They respectfully asked, "Old matriarch, are these the 2 people?" "Old matriarch, please be at ease. This time, we will definitely send them back to Shoa City alive." The matriarch nodded. Wan Chiu, who had been standing beside the carriage, walked over and threw the 2 parcels in his hands at the feet of the Lin clan and Yu Miaoqi. Shoa City was the most famous place of exile in the Great Han Dynasty. It was a barren wasteland with no signs of human habitation. Its vile living environment made even the locals want to escape, not to mention the exiled prisoners. After going there, no one could set foot on their homeland alive. Yu Miaoqi seemed to have realized something. Her voice trembled as she asked, "Grandmother, didn't you come to take me back?" I am your biological granddaughter. Rather than being exiled to Shoa City, she would rather die in Shangjing. She absolutely could not be reduced to a lowly slave who had to suffer the hardships of farming every day. She was a born noble. Don't forget, we have already severed our relationship. You wanted to kill your big brother and destroy the foundation that the family you had built with the blood and lives of several generations. Yet, I am still willing to ask the Emperor to save your life. I have already been extremely benevolent to you. Go far away. Don't let me see you again." The matriarch waved her hand. When she turned around, her back seemed so bleak and exhausted. Yu Miaoqi wanted to chase after her but was restrained by the soldiers. She continuously shouted and cursed, trying to use her blood ties and morals to force the matriarch to submit. However, all she got in return was the ridicule of passers-by. She was so heartless, yet she scolded others for being heartless. It was simply laughable. For the matriarch to save her life at the last moment, she could be considered a living Buddha. The members of the Lin clan picked up the bundle on the ground. They ignored their battered and exhausted daughter and walked towards the city gate under the escort of the soldiers. To be honest, she did not have to return to the prefecture to face her son and mother-in-law. Her heart was more relaxed and relieved. If being exiled could wash away her sins, then she would die outside the pass. As early as a month ago, Yu Siyu had already left the house. Today was the day that Yu Xiang married into the family. She wore a bright red wedding dress and sat in front of the dressing table looking at herself in the mirror. She was very satisfied with her bright and beautiful makeup. As if she felt that her lipstick was a little smudged, she used her fingernails to smooth it out bit by bit and then gently pursed her lips. The matriarch outside saw that there was no movement in the room for a long time and loudly reminded, the bride should be crying. "Today is my big day. I don't even have enough time to smile, how can I cry? Isn't this making things difficult for me?" As Yu Xiang spoke, she straightened the phoenix coronet on her head and used her fingertips to push the bead curtain in front of her forehead, making it jingle. She giggled. Tao Hong nodded in agreement. The corners of Lu Lu's mouth twitched. The matriarch standing outside the door looked at Lord Shen with a pale face. This family Shen's girl was indeed extraordinary. She was really shameless. Shen Yuanqi closed his eyes and threatened, "Xiang, if you don't cry today, we won't hold the wedding. Stay at home and accompany Big Brother for a few more years. This damned girl, she couldn't wait to marry into the family you." "Don't, Big Brother. I'll cry. I'll cry, okay?" When Yuxiang heard this, she immediately began to sob. However, this made Shen Yuanqi's face even more green. Yu Pinyin rode a tall horse and led 8 palanquins to pick up his wife. There were a total of 120 sets of dowry, which were lined up from the east to the west of the city. The scene was very grand. Although the two were originally brother and sister, the new emperor personally wrote the edict for the marriage, so no one dared to say anything. After the couple bowed to each other, the newlyweds entered the bridal chamber. When Yu Pinyin lifted the veil, the noisy bridal chamber was silent for a long time, and the sound of people gasping rose and fell. Such a beautiful and devastatingly beautiful woman had been by his side for 15 or 16 years. Only a fool wouldn't be tempted. Yu Pinyin's face turned cold. Only then did the crowd come to their senses and quickly move their gazes away from the bride's face. The matriarch picked up a bowl of dumplings and fed it to the bride. Yuxiang got up early in the morning to dress up and didn't eat anything. At this time, she was very hungry and ate 3 or 4 dumplings in a row. When she saw the matriarch move the spoon away, she glared at her with dissatisfaction. The matriarch suppressed the twitching corners of her mouth and asked, "Are these dumplings raw?" Yuxiang glanced at her brother with a smile and answered, "Raw, one is more raw than the other." "What do you mean by one is more raw than the other?" "You might as well say, one by one." Shen Yuanqi was secretly annoyed, but he also didn't know whether to laugh or cry. The people around him didn't hold back and laughed. Yu Pinyin only narrowed his eyes and looked at the little girl with a few sparks in his eyes. The two of them tied their hair and drank the nuptial wine. Yu Pinyin only had time to caress his wife's cheek before he was surrounded by his subordinates and went out to drink. Yuxiang chased after him and said, "Don't get drunk," which made them laugh again. When everyone left, Tao Hong and Lu Lu quickly took off the phoenix coronet on their master's head and helped her wash up. "Miss, quickly put on your clothes. After you're done, come over and eat something." Tao Hong called out. Yuxiang only wore a bright red dudu with mandarin ducks playing in water on her upper body and a pair of bloomers of the same color on her lower body. Because the fabric was too thin, it didn't cover what should be covered. Instead, it had a kind of hazy beauty that attracted people to explore. Her figure was originally graceful, and her skin was as smooth and white as milk. When she was lying on her side on the bed, the strong contrast between the snow-white and bright red was simply breathtaking. Tao Hong and Lu Lu couldn't help but swallow a mouthful of saliva, and their cheeks suddenly burned red. "What do you want to eat?" "I just ate a few dumplings and it's enough. If I eat more, my stomach will bulge out. It won't look good." Yuxiang waved her hand and gathered the scattered longans, red dates, peanuts, and other things on the bed into a pile. She smiled and said, "I'll peel a few peanuts and eat them. The peanuts don't take up much space. Then you should at least put on your undergarments so that you won't catch a cold." Lu Lu picked up the bright red undergarments that his master had carelessly thrown on the ground. "I'm not wearing them. It's already the end of July. Don't you think it's hot? Do I look good like this? Do I look beautiful? Do you want to pounce on me when you see me?" she asked as she lifted the hem of her dudu, revealing half of her plump, white, and smooth bosom. Tao Hong and Lu Lu's eyes widened. They hurriedly covered their slightly itchy noses and turned their backs. Yuxiang covered her mouth and chuckled, "Done. I'm very satisfied with your answers. This is the effect I wanted. Quickly come over and eat some peanuts. If your son-in-law still hasn't returned in an hour, help me go to the front door and urge him." "What kind of bride urges the groom to return to the room?" "Miss, you don't know shame." Lu Lu really wanted to kneel down in front of his master. "On the wedding night, we should do some shameful things." "Why would I know shame?" Yuxiang covered her mouth and chuckled. Tao Hong and Lu Lu were speechless. When Yu Pinyin returned to his room, he saw his little bride sitting cross-legged on the bed. There were many longans, peanuts, and red dates piled up at her feet. There were all kinds of fruit shells scattered on the floor. It was obvious that she hadn't been idle at all. It had only been a quarter of an hour, but her husband had already returned. Yu Xiang was shocked. She hurriedly swept the things at her feet under the bed and leaned against the pillow. She supported her chin with one hand and waved the other, assuming a seductive pose. She said in a coquettish voice, "You're back. Quickly come over." If it weren't for the scene of her catching peanuts with her mouth like a hooligan, Yu Pinyin would have definitely been attracted by his little wife's seductive appearance. However, at this moment, all he wanted to do was laugh. Tao Hong and Lu Lu had already slipped out of the room along the wall. Yu Xiang had already thought about how to spend her passionate wedding night. She didn't expect to lose so much face before it even started. She angrily said, "What are you laughing at? These peanuts have a good meaning. I ate a lot of them tonight. Next year, I'll give birth to a big fat boy for you." It's said that a moment of *** is worth 1,000 gold. You're only focused on laughing, but you don't know that you've already wasted tens of thousands of gold. Quickly come over. As she spoke, she untied the knot on her dudu. Yu Pinyin couldn't laugh anymore. Two balls of dark fire ignited in his eyes. He strode over to his delicate and delicious little wife and pulled her into his arms. He said in a hoarse voice, "Your husband was wrong. I'll help my wife right now." Yu Xiang only had time to grunt before she was pulled into a charming and fiery vortex. Chapter 137. Yu Pinyin opened his eyes, then reflexively hugged the warm body in his arms even tighter. His large hands moved up and down, while he breathed heavily. "Stop messing around, it's time to go to court," Yu Xiang flipped over and muttered vaguely. "It's my day off today," Yu Pinyin chuckled, then walked in with his back to her. Tao Hong and Lu Lu, who were about to enter the room to help their master wash up, couldn't help but blush when they heard the passionate moans. The two of them messed around until the sun was high up in the sky before they got up to greet the old lady. "Come over and eat breakfast, I waited for you guys the entire morning," the old lady scolded them, but had a doting smile on her face. The two of them excused themselves, then after they sat down, Yu Xiang picked up a crystal shrimp dumpling, then immediately spat it out after taking a bite, then muttered, "What a strong fishy smell, the chef must have forgotten to get rid of the fishy smell today. I'm eating the same as usual. I'm getting old, and my tongue is getting blunt." The old lady took a bite and sighed helplessly. "Don't eat it if it's fishy. Eat it." Yu Pinyin scooped a bowl of fish porridge for his wife, then used his finger to wipe off the sauce on the corner of her mouth, then put it into his mouth to suck. "This is fishy too," Yu Xiang only sniffed it slightly, then turned her head away in disdain. "What's wrong with the cook, are you sick? Today's cooking isn't as good as before." Yu Pinyin drank a mouthful, then gave up when he truly couldn't taste the fishy smell, then told Tao Hong to go to the kitchen and get a bowl of noodles. Since Yu Xiang loved to eat coriander, Tao Hong spread a thick layer of coriander on the chicken noodles. The creamy white chicken soup that gave off a rich fragrance seemed even more delicious with the green coriander as a contrast. Yu Xiang sniffed it, then was satisfied. She picked up her chopsticks and mixed it well, then put it into her mouth, then immediately spat it out. "Where did you buy this coriander? Why does it taste wrong? It's so smelly. How can that be? Isn't it just the taste of coriander?" The old lady took a piece of coriander from her bowl and chewed it, looking very puzzled. Yu Pinyin didn't even try it. Instead, she waved her hand and asked the kitchen staff to change the dishes again. They changed 4 or 5 of Yu Xiang's favorite dishes in a row, but she rejected them all for one reason or another. Yu Pinyin didn't dare to delay any longer. He immediately took out his invitation and asked the servants to call for the imperial physician. "Your wife is pregnant. She has been pregnant for more than 2 months. The fetus is very stable. Please rest assured, Duke." The imperial physician stood up and congratulated him. Everyone in the room was stunned, including Wuxia, the mother of the child. "I'm pregnant. But last month, I had a menorrhagia." Wuxia stupidly touched her stomach. When Yupinian heard this, he immediately suppressed the ecstasy in his heart and ordered, "Imperial physician, carefully check my wife's pulse again. Don't worry, High Duke, your wife's health is fine. Some people do have their periods in the first 2 months of pregnancy. Although it's different from normal people, it doesn't affect the body. This humble one will prescribe some medicine for your wife. She'll be fine after taking it for 2 or 3 days. Open, open, open. Quickly open it." The old lady finally regained her senses. After urging the imperial physician, she put her hands together and prayed to the gods. Her grandson and granddaughter-in-law had been married for 2 years, but there was still no good news. She was really anxious. The imperial physician hurriedly went to the next room to prescribe medicine. After Wuxia finished touching her stomach, she suddenly jumped up and hung on to her husband. She carefully pecked his forehead, cheeks, and the tip of his nose. Only when his face was covered in saliva did she shout happily, "I'm pregnant, I'm having a baby. I'm going to be a mother. That's right, I'm going to be a father too." Yupinian hurriedly held her butt and kissed her back. The couple was immersed in endless joy. The old lady smiled and shook her head. She led the servants out. When they reached the door, she worriedly said, "Quickly put Xiang down after you've hugged her enough. Don't let her fall." The withered family had always been a sore point for the old lady. Ever since Master Ho and her son passed away one after another, the Lin clan Yumiaochi were exiled to Shuo City, and Yu Siyu was married off. There were only 3 masters left in the huge Duke of Yu's household. On normal days, there were groups of servants coming and going, so it wasn't obvious. On the eve of New Year's Eve, the 3 of them sat around a huge round table to eat a reunion dinner. That scene was truly lonely. In the past 2 years, the old lady didn't forget to add incense oil to the child-giving guanyin every month. The paintings in her granddaughter-in-law's room were all replaced with paintings of hundreds of children and thousands of grandchildren. She had been looking forward to the stars and the moon, and finally, her little great-great-great-grandson had arrived. When she heard that Yu Siyu's eldest brother-in-law was celebrating his 30th birthday, she originally didn't want to pay attention to it. But now, she happily took her granddaughter-in-law out. "When you go, tell Siyu to share some of your good fortune. She's already been married for 2 years, but there's still no news." Sitting in the swaying carriage, the old lady's joy diminished slightly. Didn't the doctor say that there's no problem with her and son-in-law's health? Perhaps it's fate that hasn't arrived yet. When fate arrives, it'll naturally come. Look, isn't that the case for me? Wuxia happily rubbed her belly. "You're right." The old lady's joy returned. Halfway through the journey, Wuxia lifted the curtain and glanced at it. She instructed, "Turn to Chongning Street, I want to buy a box of rouge." The coachman familiarly headed to Chongning Street. Yupinian, who was following beside the carriage, heard this and reined in the horse's head. She lifted the curtain and said helplessly, "Little vinegar jar, why are you still bickering with her? How many years ago was that? You need to bicker with this kind of thing for a lifetime. Why, do you have tender feelings for the fairer sex?" Wuxia sat up and stuck out her belly, which was not yet obvious. She looked very aggrieved. Before Yupinian could speak, the old lady had already pulled her to sit down. She gently said, "The carriage is swaying. Little ancestor, hurry up and sit properly so you don't fall. Your brother only loves you. Why would he pity others? Isn't that right, Yandere?" She glared fiercely at her grandson. Yupinian nodded, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Wuxia finally calmed down. She didn't know why, but she had been increasingly angry these past few days. From time to time, she would get angry, and she couldn't control herself. Fortunately, her husband and mother-in-law were very obedient and indulged her. The carriage stopped in front of a stall selling rouge and face powder on Chongning Street. Yu Xiang lifted the curtain and said slowly, "Marchioness, bring me a box of rouge. I want the cheapest one." The woman standing behind the stall turned pale, red, purple, and finally black. However, no matter how angry she was, she saw the handsome man with a cold expression not far away. She could only humbly bend her knees and hand over a box of rouge. This woman was Chang Yafu. Because the Duke of Jinghua had participated in the rebellion of Prince Li 2 years ago, he was sentenced to be executed. The old, weak, women, and children in his family were all made into servants. Because Chang Yafu was young and beautiful, she had some capital. A small peddler took a fancy to her and bought her for only 10 taels of silver. Not only did he help her get rid of her slave status, he even took her as his official wife. Chang Yafu was originally unwilling, but after seeing her younger brother who was a manservant in a rich family and her mother who was a cleaning lady, she completely accepted her fate. Every day, she took care of the household, took care of her husband, and taught her children. Gradually, she became accustomed to the lowly life of a commoner. Her eldest sister also couldn't escape the disaster. Just as the Duke's household was in trouble, she suddenly fell ill and died. She didn't know if it was her husband's family who did it. The peddler's surname was Ho, so it wasn't wrong for Yu Xiang to call her Marchioness. However, Chang Yafu still remembered the words she mouthed to Yu Xiang when she returned to the capital from her hometown. Every time she thought about it, she felt so ashamed that she wanted to die. Marchioness, she almost became a real marchioness. If it weren't for her greed for wealth and glory, she would have married Yu Pinyin long ago. With her help, the Duke of Jinghua wouldn't have walked the path of destruction. When it was late at night and she couldn't sleep, she would often reflect on the past and herself. That kind of endless regret was like a strong poison, slowly seeping into her every nerve. She wished she could knock herself into a fool so that she could forget those unbearable memories of the past. However, every time Yu Xiang went out, he would purposely walk in front of her and sweetly call her Marchioness. That little mouth was so beautiful, but why was it so vicious? However, no matter how dissatisfied she was, she didn't dare to go against Yu Xiang when she was still the legitimate daughter of the Duke of Jinghua. Now, she didn't dare. She quickly glanced at the tall and handsome man with an outstanding temperament, then began to clean up the stall. Today, Yu Xiang came, and the nearby stall owners wanted to talk about her past. She couldn't bear it. The carriage drove far away. Yu Xiang suddenly felt bored. He casually threw the rouge to the side and sighed, "I won't come in the future." "You finally thought it through?" The matriarch lovingly stroked the messy hair by her cheek. "No, I have to take care of the baby at home in the future. How can I have time to pay attention to her? I already have the first, so how far can the second, third, and fourth be?" Recently, Yu Xiang liked to stroke her belly more and more, even if she couldn't feel anything right now. So this was what it felt like to be a mother. It was like a seal had suddenly been unlocked in her brain. She felt like her entire person had been raised to another level. Her chest was filled with endless joy and anticipation. Hearing this, the matriarch hugged her and laughed loudly. Which elder didn't like to have many children and grandchildren? It was great that her granddaughter-in-law had this awareness. Yu Xiyu's husband, Xiao Xuanze, was originally a 4th-rank Yunhui general. During Prince Li's rebellion, he stuck to his principles and stood on the crown prince's side. After the rebellion, he was promoted to a 3rd-rank Shaoqi general. In addition, his brother-in-law was the famous commander of the Dragon Scale Guard, Yu Pinyin. He was like a fish in water in the imperial court. However, his eldest brother, Xiao Xianhui, made a misstep and was won over by the 5th prince. When the entire family Yu was imprisoned, he advised him to break off the marriage and remarry. In the end, the fifth prince was stripped of his title and became an idle member of the imperial family. His eldest brother's family also didn't fare well, almost losing their scholarly honors. In the past 2 years, with his younger brother's help, they slowly improved and became a fifth-rank Honglu Temple Shaoqing. In order to expand his network and let the higher-ups realize how strong his backing was, Xiao Xianhui repeatedly begged his younger brother to invite Duke Yu. In the end, this matter fell on Yu Xiyu's head. Yu Xiyu understood her brother's habit of not liking social gatherings. She only sent someone to inform the matriarch and didn't force it. Therefore, when she bumped into her brother dismounting at the door, her eyes widened in surprise. "Big brother, why are you here?" "To accompany Xiang'er to relax," Yu Pinyin said as he carefully carried his wife down from the carriage. The matriarch stood on the shaft of the carriage and bent over to support her granddaughter-in-law. She repeatedly warned her grandson to be careful and not to bump into anything. These two pampered Yu Xiyu to the point that it angered both the gods and men. Although today was a little exaggerated, Yu Xiyu didn't think much of it and went forward to help her sister-in-law. "Why did you bring them along?" Seeing the pink-clothed beautiful woman and white-clothed youth standing behind Yu Xiyu's brows furrowed tightly, causing the beautiful woman to lower her head and cover her face to make a panicked and helpless expression. The youth glared back at her, not to be outdone. Yu Xiyu curled her lips and pointed at her husband who was chatting with her brother. She said in a low voice, "He told me to bring them to see the world. He said something about how they are the sons of a benefactor, so it's not good to mistreat them." In the first year, Yu Xiyu had lived very comfortably, thinking that she had married a good man who valued friendship and righteousness. Who knew that it wasn't a good thing for a good man to value friendship and righteousness too much? No matter how deeply his greedy and ungrateful eldest brother-in-law had hurt him, he didn't learn from his mistakes. The next time he needed help, he would still willingly help. If the two of them hadn't separated from the family and their parents-in-law had both passed away, who knew how much of a burden he would have had. Last year, he had been sent by the emperor to suppress bandits in the Shi Mountains. When he came back, he actually brought back a young and beautiful woman and a young youth, saying that they were the children of his deputy general, Li Fenghua. Li Fenghua had died in order to save him, and before his death, he had entrusted his children to him. Yu Xiyu originally planned to prepare a dowry for the woman to marry off, and then find a good marriage for the youth. Who knew that the other party would be so careless? The woman actually took advantage of her husband's drunken state to have intimate contact with him. When the youth saw that they had succeeded, he went to lure Yu Xiyu over. Yu Xiyu rushed over and caught them in the act. He was so angry that he almost vomited blood. No matter what, he had to drive the two out. The next day, the woman knelt in front of the Shao residence's door and refused to get up. The youth pointed at the horizontal board above the door and scolded Shao Xuanzi for being a beast in human clothing. Yu Xiyu had no choice but to take the woman in as a noble concubine. She originally thought that her husband had suffered a loss and would at least learn his lesson. Who knew that the two siblings only needed to pretend to be weak and lonely to win him over again, making Yu Xiyu suffer unspeakably. Family Yu had never liked to be taken advantage of, but he didn't expect that he would suffer such a big loss in the end, and there was no way to reason with them. Therefore, when the matriarch and Yu Xiang saw the two people, they felt disgusted and pulled Yu Xiyu inside, leaving them hanging on the spot. The beautiful woman blinked a pair of clear and crystalline eyes and looked toward Shao Xuanzi. Her eyes just happened to meet Yu Pinyin's bottomless eyes. She was frightened and quickly took small steps, dragging her brother, who still had an angry expression on his face, inside. There was a stage set up in the courtyard, and the male and female guests were separated by several carved screens. They sat around a round table, drinking tea and listening to the play. When the matriarch saw that her granddaughter-in-law was about to raise her cup to drink, she quickly stopped her in a low voice. She also saw that her eyes were staring at a plate of pastries on the table, as if she was drooling. She thickened her skin and got up, going around half the table to bring it to her. Eat slowly, be careful not to choke. Don't drink the tea on the table, drink the ginseng tea I brought. 1 Chio, go to the carriage and bring the food box I prepared in advance. The matriarch lightly patted her granddaughter-in-law's back and helped her wipe the pastry crumbs from the corner of her mouth. Matriarch, are you serving your granddaughter-in-law or serving your little ancestor? A noblewoman teased. Xiang'er is pregnant, isn't she our prefecture-use little ancestor? The matriarch's words were not without a hint of boasting. Furen is pregnant? That's really worthy of celebration. I wonder when sister-in-law will also have good news. Xiao Xuanhui's wife, Madame Wu, had a smile on her face, but her eyes were full of ridicule. She was originally the eldest sister-in-law, but because of her husband's official career, she had no choice but to lower herself in front of Wuxia. Her heart had long been filled with humiliation and jealousy. Although she couldn't openly oppose Wuxia, she liked to poke her from time to time. Speaking of this, Wuxia couldn't help but feel sad and subconsciously touched her belly. Just at this moment, Madame Li, who was standing behind her, suddenly turned her head and bent over to retch. Her thick eyelashes were covered with tears and looked very lovable. The opera troupe was changing the stage, so the sound of gongs and drums stopped for a moment. Thus, her movements were particularly noticeable. Madame Wu was stunned, then exclaimed with joy, "Sister-in-law, don't tell me you're pregnant. I'll send someone to find a doctor for you." As soon as she finished speaking, Wuxia suddenly turned her head to look at Madame Li with a cold and stern gaze. Yuxiang leisurely smiled and said, "Whether she's pregnant or not, Xiu will check when we get back. Today is a joyous occasion, yet you're openly inviting a doctor into the house. You're really not particular. Moreover, she's just a concubine, how can she be worthy of being called sister-in-law? Furen is willing to be cheap, so don't implicate our Xiu." As soon as she finished speaking, she gently patted Wuxia's tightly clenched fist. Wuxia quickly calmed down and didn't say anything. She only glanced at Madame Wu with a smile that wasn't a smile. Because the male and female guests were only separated by a few screens, everything that was said on the other side could be easily heard, not to mention when the gongs and drums stopped for a moment. Xiao Xianhui and Xiao Xuanzi awkwardly nodded and apologized to the expressionless Yupinian. Madame Li's younger brother was quite arrogant, so he couldn't help but show some resentment. Yupinian picked up his wine glass and poured himself a drink. From time to time, he would send someone over to remind his wife not to be picky with her food and drink. Xiao Xuanzi was originally his former subordinate, but because of the concubine incident a year ago, their relationship was no longer the same as before. At this moment, they sat opposite each other in silence. When others saw the stagnant atmosphere at the main table, they all shook their heads and secretly lamented that the Xiao brothers didn't know how to conduct themselves. One was too indecisive, while the other was too greedy. Sooner or later, they would gradually drift away from family Yu. While they were thinking, a brightly colored female lead came out from the stage. She held a golden goblet in her hand and began to sing the song, "Drunken Imperial Concubine." She walked to the side of the stage with graceful and swaying steps. Her bewitching and misty eyes were fixed on the handsome young man at the main table. With such an obvious action, not to mention the jealous Yuxiang, even the bystanders noticed the clues. The old madam hurriedly pressed her granddaughter-in-law's shoulder and whispered, "Calm down, don't throw a tantrum. You're pregnant right now." Yuxiang touched the baby in her belly and had no choice but to restrain herself. Wuxia also forgot to bicker with Madame Li and sent someone to inquire about the female lead's background. Madame Wu smiled as she picked up her teacup and took a sip. She said, "There's no need to inquire. She's the famous female lead, Xian Luo. The Xian Luo that the sixth prince didn't hesitate to spend a lot of money to take in." Yuxiang raised her brows and said slowly, "This name is really euphemistic. Xian Luo, why not just call her Little Radish? Yu Siyu almost spat out the tea in her mouth. On the other end of the line, Yu Pinyin finally showed his first smile of the day. His deep eyes were filled with love. The female lead on the stage was subdued by his affectionate gaze. She paused for a moment before starting to sing the next line. When she turned around, she smiled at him. Madame Li's younger brother finally couldn't hold himself back. He pointed at her and said with a smile, "I think she looks a bit familiar. She looks like someone." No one at the table responded, and the atmosphere immediately became a bit awkward. Xiao Xuanze tried to smooth things over because he was the son of his benefactor. "Oh, who does she look like?" "She looks like Madame Duqiu. If the heavy makeup on her face was washed away, her beauty would be comparable to Madame's." Comparing a lowly actress to the Duqiu's wife, and doing it in front of Yu Pinyin, was this young masterly crazy? Anyone who had stayed in the capital for a long time knew that Yu Pinyin loved his wife as much as his life. The guests who were chatting or laughing all quieted down, as if their pressure points had been pressed. Xiao Xuanze, who had answered him, blushed and looked anxiously at Yu Pinyin. Yu Pinyin's face was covered with a layer of frost. He put down his wine cup with a thud and stood up to leave. When he reached the screen, he turned around and said, "General Xiao, I forgot to tell you. My family Yu has a rule, men are not allowed to take concubines. If you marry Siyu, you will be a member of my Xiao family. If you don't abide by the rules, I, Yu Pinyin, can dispose of you. Goodbye." On the other end, Yu Xiang and the old madam tugged at Yu Siyu, who was completely stunned. If it weren't for her brother's example, Yu Siyu could still force herself to accept her fate. However, now that there was a comparison, she became dissatisfied. She was mostly grateful to Xiao Xuanze. If she really wanted to talk about love, it was far from the point where she could only be with him. In addition, in recent years, she had been schemed against by the Li siblings and quarreled with Xiao Xuanze every few days. That little bit of gratitude had long been worn away, leaving only exhaustion. She drained the strong wine beside her and said calmly, "Let's go home. Go back to the family Yu. If this place didn't hold her, there would be a place for her to stay." Madame Wu knew that something was wrong. She wanted to stop them, but was separated by the prefecture Yu's guards. She could only watch as the group of people walked away. Without Duke Yu's strong backing, her brother-in-law's dull personality would sooner or later be ostracized by his colleagues. Only now did she understand that Yu Siyu was not only her sister-in-law, but also the pillar of the Xiao family. As the saying goes, everyone kicks a man who is down. If she left, the Xiao family would face the danger of collapse at any moment. Madame Li was secretly happy, but her face showed some grievance. She lowered her head and wiped her tears. Madame Wu didn't care whether the occasion was right or not. She slammed the table and scolded, "What are you crying for? It's all your brother's fault. Brother-in-law, hurry up and go to the Duke's mansion to apologize." Xiao Xuanze recovered from his daze and hurriedly chased after them. Xiao Xianhui sent the guests away awkwardly. When he turned back to look at the Li siblings, his eyes were filled with gloomy killing intent. Young Master Li was just acting on a whim. Now that he came to his senses, he knew that he had caused a great disaster. He immediately trembled in fear. In order to appease Duke Yu, there were two paths in front of the Xiao family: 1. Simply divorce Yu Siyu; 2. Get rid of him and his sister. Young Master Li's intestines turned green with regret when he provoked a fatal disaster with just one sentence. After Yu Siyu returned home, she settled down for a few days. She felt that it would be impossible for her to find a perfect husband like her brother in this lifetime. However, she was a proud person. In addition, she had been influenced by Yu Xiang for a long time. She would rather let go than go back and compromise. Without Madame Li, there would be Madame Zhao, Madame Qian, and Madame Sun in the future. She would waste her life fighting with other women. How boring and ridiculous it would be. She didn't let Xiao Xuanze deal with the Li siblings. Instead, she signed the divorce papers. After Xiao Xuanze returned home, he fell seriously ill. After recovering from his illness, he found that he had been demoted. He was transferred to the most remote and desolate northern tribes and could never return to the capital in this lifetime. He took the Li siblings with him. On the way, Madame Li couldn't bear the labor and miscarried. Young Master Li knew that the northern tribes was a barren land. Not to mention his future, he might even die of exhaustion. He took advantage of the night to escape. In the end, Yu Xiu remarried and became the second wife. Coincidentally, the other party was the small steward that Yu Xiang had taken a fancy to when she first proposed marriage. There was a rule in the family, no concubine before 40 and without a son. Chapter 138. Yu Miaoqi and the Lin clan had already been on the road for 2 months, and they would arrive at Shuo City in half a month. Shuo City, other than a simple city, was only left with an endless loess slope. Whether it was from the ground or from the air, all that was left was a barren land. If a man wanted to survive here, he could only bury himself in the barren land and grow enough food to survive. Women could only rely on men. Because the land was barren and the climate was harsh, men couldn't even feed themselves, so how could they feed their wives? Therefore, women were often seen as burdens. Other than giving birth to children, they could only be used to vent their anger or lust. There was no man in Shuo City who didn't like to beat his wife. Under long periods of hard work and abuse, women in Shuo City usually lived very short lives. There were very few people who could live past the age of 40. Yu Miaoqi inquired about the situation in Shuo City all the way, and the more she heard, the colder her heart became. On this day, the exile team stopped at an abandoned relay station. Everyone found an empty seat to sit down and took out the dry food in their bags to eat. At this time, the moon was high in the sky, and the extremely haggard faces were plated with a layer of bleak white under the moonlight, looking very frightening. Yu Miaoqi suddenly felt a prickly feeling in her back. She turned her head and found that it was a prison guard. The other side was chewing on beef jerky while staring at her with bloodshot eyes. His dark pupils were filled with tyranny and lust. Among all the female prisoners, only Yu Miaoqi was an unmarried young girl. She looked very beautiful, and although she was stained with dust, she was very eye-catching in the contrast of a group of dusty old women. The prison guard had been holding back for a long time, and could no longer hold back. He finished chewing the beef jerky in 2 or 3 bites, and strode over to Yu Miaoqi and dragged her into the bushes. "What are you doing? Help, mother, save me!" Yu Miaoqi screamed. The Lin clan hurriedly rushed over, but was kicked over by the prison guard. She clutched her chest and couldn't get up for a long time. "What's the rush? Once I'm done with her, it'll naturally be your turn." The other party's sinister laughter startled the birds in the treetops. "I am Duke Yu's younger sister. If you touch me, Duke Yu will definitely cut you into pieces." Yu Miaoqi screamed at the top of her lungs. The Lin clan also hurriedly chimed in, trying to make the jailer back off. The jailer hesitated, but he still held on to Yu Miaoqi's neck and turned to look at the leader of the guards. "She is indeed Duke Yu's sister. Just don't kill her. I promised old Madame Yu that I would send them to Shuo City alive." The guard waved his hand casually. Really? Is it really fine as long as you don't kill him?" The jailer doubted his ears. He wasn't from the capital. When she returned, she sold the mother and daughter to the largest brothel in Shuo City. The Lin clan couldn't stand the hard work. Their faces quickly aged. They were only 30 years old, but they looked like old grannies. This also became her greatest fortune. After entering the brothel, she was still responsible for washing the clothes of the girls in the building. It was no different from staying in the city lord's manor. Yu Miaoqi was different. The child in her belly was aborted by the city lord's wife, and the brothel keeper forced her to accept customers right after she recovered. Every time she thought she was going to be successful, fate would give her a fatal blow, causing her to repeatedly struggle on the edge of despair. She wanted to escape, but every time she was caught and brought back, she would be inhumanely tortured. After being tossed around a few times, she learned to be obedient. She clenched her teeth and laid flat on the bed, allowing others to toss and turn her body. Over time, her shame was completely wiped away, and she became the most popular prostitute in Shoa City. After 3 years, her value had already doubled. Even the Lin clan was sent to her side to serve her. She no longer needed to wash a large basin of clothes in the cold weather. Hurry up and dress up. There's an important guest coming tonight. The brothel keeper pushed open the door and entered, bringing with her a fragrant scent. Who is it? Yu Miaoqi raised her eyebrows. It's the imperial envoy who's following orders to patrol the border. Even the city lord said that the other party has great power. If you win him over, you'll naturally enjoy endless glory and wealth in the future. It's almost time. Hurry up and comb your hair, change your clothes and go out. The brothel keeper came in a hurry and left in a hurry. Yu Miaoqi immediately had the desire to curry favor with her, urging the Lin clan to help her comb her hair. Which mother in this world would watch her daughter go out and be sold? And which mother would frame her own child? The Lin clan felt that they were no longer fit to be humans. The only reason they were alive was to atone for their sins. She picked up the comb and helped her daughter comb her hair. Her senile face had the usual numb expression. Yu Miaoqi walked gracefully to the banquet hall. When she saw the extremely handsome and cold man sitting on the main seat, she felt as if she had been struck by a bolt of lightning that even her spirit was shattered. Big brother? She cried out in shock. Only then did the city lord remember Yu Miaoqi's past. Duke Yu's sister was actually a prostitute in Shoa City. This was simply a slap to the other party's face. If Duke Yu was angry, he didn't need to live. The city lord broke out in a cold sweat. Just as he was racking his brain for a response, he saw Duke Yu put down his wine cup and lightly say, "Impersonating an official is a crime punishable by death. Do you not want to live?" Only then did Yu Miaoqi remember that she had already severed ties with her family Yu. She quickly knelt down and begged for mercy. Her head was extremely low, not daring to meet Yu Pinyan's eyes. "You can leave." Yu Pinyan waved his sleeve and said to the city lord, "This official does not need anyone to serve me. I only need a pot of wine to drink by myself. Do as you please." When the city lord saw that his attitude was so frivolous, his anger towards his madam's improper handling of matters instantly dissipated. He wanted to persuade him to enjoy 1 or 2 beauties, but he heard Duke Yu's trusted aide tease, "You don't know, do you? Duke Yu is afraid of his wife. Even though he's far away at the border, he doesn't dare to act recklessly. He's determined to protect his madam's chastity." Yu Pinyan smiled slightly and actually admitted it in front of Shoa City's officials. That's exactly the case. Because of love, there was worry. Because of love, there was fear. Being afraid of his wife was also an expression of loving his wife. Of course, he definitely wouldn't say these words to these mediocre people, nor did he need others to understand. He just needed to stick to his bottom line. The city lord didn't dare to say more. Seeing that Duke Yu's aides were happily drinking and making merry, he slowly let go. After Yu Miaoqi left the room, she stood frozen for a long time. Only when the guards in the hallway came forward to chase her away did she stagger away. "I saw Big Brother. He's in the banquet hall. Aren't you going to take a look?" She grabbed onto the Lin clan, her eyes bursting with hope. Yu Pinyan could ignore her, but how could he ignore his own mother? The Lin clan stared blankly for a long time before slowly coming back to her senses. She smiled bitterly, what's there to look at? I've long severed our relationship as mother and son. Just obediently stay here and don't think about anything else. We're here to atone for our sins. We definitely can't leave Shoa City in this lifetime. She grabbed her daughter's shoulders and used all her strength to press her down on the embroidered stool. Her eyes were filled with determination. Yu Miaoqi struggled for a bit, but in the end, she hung her head dejectedly. Endless regret surged in her heart. If she hadn't wanted to compete with Yu Xiang back then, if she had complied with the matriarch's arrangements and gotten married, if she had. Chapter 139. It was the annual gathering. The common people and nobles of Shangjing gathered at Baiyun Taoist Temple to pray for good weather in the coming year. Shen Yuanqi was walking in the peach blossom forest when he heard the familiar laughter in front of him. His footsteps paused, and he turned around to leave. Lord Shen, wait for me. The 9th princess hurriedly chased after him, followed by 2 palace maids carrying food boxes. Lord Shen, the peach blossoms here are in full bloom, and the scenery is pleasant. Why don't we sit down and eat something? She raised her small face, and her black and bright eyes were filled with the joy of seeing her sweetheart. The 2 palace maids immediately took out cloth towels and spread them on the soft grass. They then took out the refreshments from the food boxes and arranged them neatly. Come and sit. Shen Yuanqi was still hesitating, but the 9th princess had already pulled him to the ground. Seeing that his sitting posture was a bit awkward, she pursed her small lips and smiled cheerfully. This green tea cake was newly developed by the Imperial Kitchen's chef. It's sweet but not greasy, and melts in the mouth. When you eat it, your mouth is filled with the fragrance of tea. I really like it. Lord Shen, you should also try it. The 9th princess picked up a piece of light green cake and fed it to Shen Yuanqi, her expression revealing some expectation. Shen Yuanqi couldn't help but sigh in his heart. Although the 9th princess grew up in the palace, her temperament was very simple. She would always pour out her heart to the people she cared about. She didn't have any other methods, and didn't know how to entice the other party to fall in love with her. The only thing she knew how to do was to give all the things she liked to the other party. She loved to eat, so from time to time, she would send delicious cakes to the Shen residence, which made Shen Yuanqi quite vexed. Very early on, Shen Yuanqi had thought about what kind of wife he would marry in the future. The other party must be virtuous and capable, gentle, and smooth in handling matters. He would work hard in the imperial court, and his wife would help him manage the household and stabilize the inner courtyard. The 9th princess was completely different from his expectations, but she had the most valuable quality, sincerity. Who didn't like sincere people? After experiencing so many betrayals and hardships, Shen Yuanqi longed for a simple life and simple relationships. It wasn't that he didn't love the 9th princess, but the other party was the emperor's younger sister. Her status was too high to reach. Although he was a second-rank assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel, he was born in a merchant family and had sold himself as a slave. No matter how he thought about it, he wasn't worthy of the 9th princess, this kind of proud daughter of heaven. In order not to add to the sorrow, he could only suppress the desire in his heart. He waved his hand and said, "Princess, you can eat it yourself. This official has no interest in sweet pastries. Please don't send food boxes to this official's residence in the future." The 9th princess was stunned and forced to smile. "So you don't like to eat pastries?" "Actually, I don't like it either. I won't eat it anymore." "Then what do you like? I'll send you off instead." She stretched out her fingertips and unconsciously messed up the petal-shaped pastries. She looked very depressed. Replying to the 9th princess, "This official doesn't have any other hobbies. I don't dare to trouble the princess." Shen Yuanqi couldn't bear it and added, "The pastries have already been brought. It would be a waste if you don't eat them." This official will accompany the princess to eat 1 or 2 pieces. After eating, I still have important matters to discuss with my colleagues. I have to leave first. The princess doesn't have to send things to my residence in the future. This official's fortune is poor and I'm afraid I can't afford it. How could the 9th princess not feel such an obvious refusal? She blinked her wet eyes and stammered, You will accompany me to eat the pastries before leaving? Shen Yuanqi hesitated for a moment before nodding, yes. The 9th princess picked up a piece of pastry and used her teeth to grind it bit by bit. After grinding for a long time, she still didn't see the pastry wrapping the outside layer. If she ate it like this, she wouldn't be able to finish it even if the sun set. Shen Yuanqi wanted to laugh, but he restrained himself just as the corners of his mouth rose. The young girl in front of him was so pure and beautiful. She should be together with the most outstanding man in the great Han dynasty. However, she wasn't a match for him, a poor scholar without any background. The 9th princess slowly licked the pastry wrapping with the tip of her tongue. Her wet eyes were fixed on the young man's incomparably handsome face. It was as if the other party was the wine that accompanied the meal. Before drinking, she was already drunk. 2 clusters of red quietly floated on her cheeks. Shen Yuanqi's whole body heated up from her gaze. He felt as if he was sitting on pins and needles. Just as he was hesitating whether he should leave or not, he saw his manservant hurriedly run over and report, Master, Wu Darren is looking for you. What's the matter? This servant doesn't know. He said that he has something important to discuss with you. After speaking, he saw the 9th princess and quickly knelt down to salute. It was just a random excuse. He didn't expect that someone would be so cooperative. Shen Yuanqi breathed a sigh of relief and immediately got up to leave. When he walked far away, the 9th princess ate the pastry in her hand in 2 or 3 mouthfuls. She rubbed her red eyes. I want the Lord Shen to be my prince consort. I ask imperial brother to grant me a marriage. She stood up with a firm expression on her face. Half a year ago, Yu Xiang smoothly gave birth to the eldest son of the Duke of Yu's family. Because he inherited all the advantages of his parents' appearance, the baby had the ability to capture all the women in the great Han dynasty when he was still in swaddling clothes. He charmed the matriarch until she was dizzy and disoriented. She held the baby in her arms and refused to let go no matter what. Even when Yu Xiang sent someone to ask for the baby, she complained and scolded him. She also repeatedly urged her grandson to quickly submit a memorial to the throne to ask for the title of heir. Before he was even a month old, he had already become the heir of the Duke of Yu's family. This speed was simply unprecedented. From this, it could be seen that the family Yu loved babies. At this time, the matriarch was carrying her grandson to the training hall to watch the banquet, leaving Yu Xiang to socialize with a group of noble ladies. Madame Shui pulled Yu Xiang to a side hall and asked, Your eldest brother is already over 20 years old, but he doesn't have a single person by his side who cares about him. Have you ever made a decision for him? Shen Yuanqi neither took a concubine nor was he willing to take a wife. He was already 24 or 25 years old, and in the great Han dynasty, he was considered an old leftover man. However, Yu Xiang was not an ancient person. He didn't worry about him in the slightest. Thus, he smiled and said, If he wants to marry, then marry. If he doesn't want to marry, then so be it. Why should I make a decision for him? This matter depends on fate and mutual affection. It can't be forced. You can't say it like that. A man should first establish a family and then establish a career. Only with a wife and children can he live comfortably and have a goal. Madame Shui's face was smiling, but her gaze towards Yu Xiang was somewhat cold. In the end, they were still half-siblings and didn't have much affection for each other. Otherwise, how could she be so indifferent to her elder brother? She didn't even think about how much effort Shen Yuanqi had put in when the family Yu was in dire straits. She really was an ingrate who forgot favors and violated justice. Yu Xiang sensed the change in her expression, but he didn't take it to heart. Raising his brows, he asked, "Madam's words are reasonable. Since Madam has asked, presumably you already have a candidate in mind. Quickly tell me so that I can help Big Brother take a look." Madame Shui finally revealed a satisfied expression when she saw that Yu Xiang was on the right track. "I really did find a girl for him, my niece. She just reached marriageable age this year. Not only is she gentle and beautiful, she also has some talent. She will definitely be very compatible with Yuanqi. Today, I brought her over to the Dao Right Hall. Would you like to take a look?" Upon hearing that the other party was Madame Shui's niece, Yu Xiang's eyes flashed with a cold light. Just as he was about to refuse, he heard a flustered and exasperated voice from the entrance to the hall. "No. The Lord Shen is my prince consort. He can't marry anyone else." The two immediately turned their heads and saw the ninth princess with her hands on her hips and a pout on her lips, fiercely glaring at Madame Shui. Madame Shui jumped in fright and stammered, when did Yuanqi become the prince consort? How come this commoner didn't know? After today, he will. I will return to the palace and ask Imperial Brother to issue a decree." The ninth princess walked up to Madame Shui and looked down at her with her two nostrils. Imitating the dignified bearing of the Empress Dowager and Imperial sister-in-law, she reprimanded, "You're quite bold, daring to even steal this prince consort. Which family are you from? Hurry and tell me your name." No matter how foolish the ninth princess was, she had still been pampered and raised by the emperor, empress, and crown prince. Her awe-inspiring noble aura was not something an ordinary person could endure. Madame Shui was pressed down so hard that she couldn't breathe. She looked pleadingly at Yu Xiang. Yu Xiang smiled as he patted the ninth princess and introduced her. "This is Madame Shui, my big brother's foster mother. Back then, Master Shui was my big brother's benefactor. Princess, for his sake, please do not bicker with Madame Shui." "So it was you." The ninth princess no longer pouted. She also lowered her raised chin and looked at the sweet ninth princess. "Madame Shui still has matters to attend to, so I will send her off. Princess, please wait here for a moment. When I return, I will discuss my big brother's marriage with you." Deliberately emphasizing the last two words, Yu Xiang gave the ninth princess a deep glance, then supported Madame Shui, who seemed to have been pardoned, out. The two turned a corner, and Yu Xiang whispered into her ear, "My big brother remembers your kindness and has taken great care of your Shui estate in these past few years. He has also never had any improper thoughts. However, you use the yardstick of a petty person to measure the heart of a gentleman. You always believe that my big brother frequently interacts with you because he has his eye on the Shui estate's business, so you are always on guard against him. From time to time, your cold words will stab at his heart. This is nothing. My big brother can endure it, and so can I. But you actually take our tolerance for granted, and now you're even scheming against him. If you marry your niece, my big brother's inner residence will be in your hands. If you give birth to a son who inherits the family business, will my big brother's estate be surnamed Shen or Shui? I'll tell you the truth. My tolerance for you has already reached its limit. If you dare to have any devious thoughts, I only need to move my little finger to destroy your Shui estate's meager business. You'd best take care of yourself." Madame Shui felt a chill run down her spine. Even after Yu Xiang had walked far away, she was still in a daze. In these past few years, Shen Yuanqi had treated her with reverence, and even Yu Xiang had treated her with courtesy and support. She had actually forgotten just how savage and vindictive this unmarried person had been. Although the Shui estate's business was large, how could it compare to the Duke of Yu's estate? Opposing Yu Xiang was like an ant trying to shake a large tree, and this wasn't even mentioning the fact that the ninth princess had been dragged into this mess. With a gust of cold wind, Madame Shui finally came to her senses. Suppressing the fear in her heart, she fled with her niece. When Shen Yuanqi heard the 9th princess's declaration at Leying Hall, he didn't know what to feel. It was as if he had eaten several dozen caddies of honey. It was so sweet that his teeth felt weak. Even though he knew it was impossible, he couldn't help but look forward to the future. The Emperor of Qingqian, who had just recently ascended the throne, needed to win over a group of capable people who didn't have deep backgrounds. In addition, Shen Yuanqi's conduct was upright, and his inner residence was clean. After some consideration, he decided to help the 9th princess. The ecstasy and gratitude in Shen Yuanqi's heart was indescribable. With his brother-in-law, Yu Pinyin, as a comparison, he was completely devoted to the 9th princess. He had truly achieved the goal of having only one person for the rest of his life. 166, you're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.